Welcome to A Dose of Feel Good. I'm your host, Whitney Bischoff, and today we are going to talk to the have to versus get to mentality. You can see full show notes at doseoffeelgood.my.canva.site. Now let's dive into today's episode. We are at episode 5, y'all. We made it, and I hope you enjoyed the first few episodes that are out in the universe. Today, I want to talk about this, what I call this have to versus get to mentality, and really focusing on shifting our mindset from all of the things that we feel like we have to do. That's all about perception, and change really that thought process into these are things we get to do and the power of those moments. I think we often get stuck, especially in America. I haven't lived elsewhere, but I think we hear it a lot here of just this always having to be go, go, go all of the time. And I even think about like in the workplaces, I think we're shifting a little bit, but we feel bad if we take days to ourselves, if we're not sick and we're not working. And that's a really weird mentality to have. I think even just knowing that if you don't take the time and space for yourself, you're not going to show up as your best self for the work you're doing, whatever that looks like. And I think we've gotten here because, at least in my experience, I feel sometimes like I have to prove my worth, or if I don't quite measure up, then am I really worth it? And that can be a really vulnerable place to be in. But I think we all sometimes feel that way, that we have to do more or be more to be validated as either being worth it in relationships, our work, whatever that is, but that we have to keep measuring up and doing more and more and more. And we question, like, if I don't, where does my worth fall? And that's a very weird place to be in, for sure. I think we can start to kind of shift and get out of that space by taking a moment and thinking of right now, wherever you are, all of the things that you feel like you have to do. So really that mindset of I have to do X, Y, Z, whether that's projects or maybe it's chores at home that are never ending, it feels like. It might be like working out, going to the gym, eating right. So these things that I have to do this. And it can get us in this headspace of just trudging along, not really living life, but just going from moment to moment, knowing that those are the things we feel like we have to do to truly measure up. But we can get out of that headspace. So thinking of what would happen if we shifted from all of these things that we feel like we have to do, and instead really just taking a moment to give space for gratitude that we get to do these things, even the things we don't love doing, and recognizing that these are things that we get to do. We have the privilege to do. And I think when we approach life or the things that we do on a day-to-day basis from that mentality, it not only helps us to kind of move through those day-to-day tasks that aren't necessarily going away, but we just approach it differently. We approach it with this light, and I think that can really help, especially sometimes when we feel just stuck. It's normal to feel stuck in those moments, but taking a pause and just even reframing the verbiage of I have to go to the gym, for example, but instead literally just out loud saying, I get to go to the gym. And if you hear that, that's a very different mentality. And I think that's a cool way to approach life, and for it not to feel so go, go, go. And even if we think about like the questioning our worth, we don't do that as much because we know what we're bringing to the table as things that we get to do, the things we get to offer. And I just really love that. So I actually heard this, I don't know, I was watching someone's Instagram story a while back, and there was a coach that was being interviewed, and the publicist, reporter, whatever you want to call it, asked the coach, they were talking about a star player on their team. They asked a question, something along the lines of, what do you have to say about whatever the person's name is, having to get better grades, having to really like show up and be on point all the time because they are the star player. And the coach was like, I am going to stop you right there. And whoever, again, the person's name is, we'll call him Bill today. But Bill doesn't have to do anything. Bill has this really great gift. I think it was basketball on the basketball court. He has this great gift. And because he has that privilege of doing so well, kind of being that person that people look up to, he gets to then rise to that challenge. So it's not this drudgery of having to do all of these things, but instead he gets to because of the person that he is. And I was like, that is a really, really cool way of looking at things that I think even like in our work, right? That when we're in the moments and we're having to do all of these things, it can be hard, it can be overwhelming. But if we think of it as I get to, and I get to see this end result, and all of the people that eventually those things could impact, I think that makes it a lot easier to do those things and trudge through sometimes the day to day, especially when it gets hard. I think I recently had a brain surgery, for those that don't know me super well. And I've had this surgery before, so it wasn't anything that was life shattering by any means. But it was still brain surgery. So when I was recovering, and even kind of going into it, like people would ask, are you overwhelmed? Are you anxious? And I always responded as I'm not really worried about it because most of that is completely outside of my control. But I had seen that coach's interview right before my surgery, and as I started to feel better, my recovery time was actually pretty short. And I started thinking of, even this surgery is something that, yes, I have to do to feel better. But I shifted that mindset and really thought of it as this is something that I get to do to feel better. Thinking of a lot of people in other places, they might not be able to afford that medical care or have the people and expertise, or, this surgery is really intricate and takes a lot of technology. And so there's a lot of spaces where someone might be feeling the same way I do, and they don't have that opportunity to feel better. So this was something that I get to do and got to do, and I do feel much better in a different way. Even in like the rest and recovery, which was only supposed to be like a week or so. Last time it took like 3 weeks to recover. So, but in that moment, I felt better after like 3 days. And I'm somebody that also likes to go, go, go. I have to feel busy. And when I'm just kind of sitting there, it can make me feel very uncomfortable. So as I was in those moments, I again had to reframe my thought process of it's not something I have to recover from. It's something that I get to. I get to pause. I get to really take that space to rest after being on the go so much. And even telling myself, like, I will want this back sooner rather than later. So rather than sitting in a space where you're just dreading, like, how much longer is this going to take? Instead, just being thankful for that rest and recovery spaces. I think when we frame these things as stuff or whatever we get to do, brings us into a space of not taking things for granted. Life is short. There's a lot of things buzzing around us. And if we could just take a pause and a moment to appreciate the small things, big things, everything in between, I think that keeps us from just going from one thing to the next and really appreciating the world around us. It brings us into a space of living in a space of thanks, not only for just all the good that's around us, but even the bad and everything in between. I've been hardcore into the Broadway lately. I pretty much am always into Broadway. But of course, Cynthia Erivo in Wicked just blew my mind. And so I'm trying to find all of her songs. Anyways, she sings a song called I'm Here from The Color Purple. Beautiful show. You should watch it. But one of the lines in that song is, I'm thankful for the good and the bad days that I'm living. And when I heard that, I honestly sing it at the top of my lungs because I just think it's a beautiful line. But it is stopping and being thankful for all of the moments that we have in our lives. I think this is extra important. Again, we take so much of our lives for granted. And when we stop and think that not every day is guaranteed, it really helps to shift our mindset a little bit. So I want to ask, when was the last time when you felt super overwhelmed or stressed? Which I think a lot of us, a lot of the time, that's okay. But in those moments, have you ever paused and just gave thanks for even those moments that brought you to being overwhelmed? But also that pause in the beauty in all of the small things, again, that we often take for granted. I also think, especially in those moments, the hard things we have to go through, they teach us life lessons. And in the moment, those can be really hard to look at and to see. But reminding ourselves that we grow and we become the best versions of ourselves because of those experiences. And sometimes it takes us time to process, what does this mean for us? But I think even sharing those stories of how we maybe went through something and it made us into the people that we are can be really powerful. It makes us all human and relatable. And when we can share that vulnerability, no matter how hard it is, it might be what someone needs to hear to know that they aren't alone as well. I think it is really important, though, to note that there isn't excuses for being mean or for the world to treat us badly. That's a totally different story and probably a different topic for a different day. But we get to choose to be better, even when it's hard. And I think that's a super cool thing. Like we're going to experience hard things. We're going to experience challenges, whether it's things that are done to us or things maybe that are just that we have to go through. But taking a pause and still being grateful, whether it's for the small things in those moments or knowing that it's going to make us into a better future version of ourselves. And I really love that. So I have a few things that I would like us to take away from today. So first, I do this every day. I've been doing it for the last couple of years. And I highly encourage you to end each day with gratitude, no matter how small. It might be some days I got out of bed. That's a win. So whatever those wins are, really taking note of those. So I know there's digital journaling apps you can use. I use little Post-it cards that look like recipe box. And so I can look back year over year of what were the best things on that day. So if you want pictures of that, let me know. But that's how I end each day. And I think it reminds me to be thankful of those things, even if it feels like I didn't accomplish anything. I think the second piece is to intentionally shift our mindset, especially in those hard moments of, I get to live life. I get to live it to the fullest. I get to experience all of these things that maybe somebody else doesn't or wishes. I also saw this quote that you're living the life that someone else could only dream of. And I think that's beautiful and reminds us to be thankful and grateful for the things we get each and every day. And I think the last piece, which at least for me is probably one of the hardest, is share what I call your overcomer story. So how did you get through the things? And it might be just what someone else needs to learn and grow from. I think of this quote, kind of, but the things you wish you would have known that no one told you. The more we can share what we've learned and done, someone else in the future doesn't have to say, I only wish I would have known, because we've experienced those things and we can remind ourselves to be grateful even for the things that we've had to overcome. So that's a wrap. And I hope the next time when you're overwhelmed, when you're stressed, when you're maybe going through something hard, that you take a second to shift our mindset from these are the things we have to do and have to experience or have to work through, and instead changing that to it's something that we get to do and we can find the beauty in that. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you are feeling ready to conquer the week and let your impact ripple out to the world around you. Let's connect on Instagram and Threads at Dose of Feel Good Podcast. If you're loving the podcast, I'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button and leave a review. Until next time, share your own dose of feel good and never underestimate the power of positivity.